Hello and welcome to yet another edition of That Catholic Saint Sky. I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, and today we're going to discuss Mother Elizabeth Prout, an English Passionist religious who was very intimately involved with the work and lives of two former subjects whom we've discussed, Blessed Dominic Barberi, and also the servant of God, soon to be venerable, we hope, Ignatius Spencer. And she did all of her work in England, did amazing things in the field of the Lord for the poor, for the body of Christ. And joining me today to discuss this is Sister Sister Elisa Rainier up in Rhode Island. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
that
fantastic.
Is correct.
She's also a Passionist religious, and the great blessing that we're going to have is to discuss Mother Elizabeth's life with us. Elisa and Elizabeth, very closely related. And so, Mother, first of all, Sister, pardon me, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am originally from New York. I grew up in New York City. I joined the community, the Sisters of the Cross and Passion is our formal title. I joined when I was 19 years old, and I hesitate to tell you how many years ago that was, but suffice it to say that I retired from my full-time ministry a few years ago. My background is in church law, and so I worked for all of my adult life, either in teaching or in diocesan administration. I've lived in Rhode Island for a number of years. I also spent 7 years in Los Angeles working in the Chancery office there. I also took a few years of teaching at Catholic University. I was on the canon law faculty at Catholic U. And my last administrative position was in Connecticut, actually, where I directed a few offices and was the overseer of our parish restructuring efforts. I was there for about 15 years. Wow, and now I'm retired. So I'm here in Rhode Island.
That is a career and a half.
It's been very, very interesting. Yes, it's been very interesting.
So today you're going to talk with us about Mother Elizabeth Prout. And I understand she had a different name in religion.
She was Mother Mary Joseph. That was her name in the community, but her name from birth is Elizabeth Prout.
Very good. And so tell us a little bit about her. What's her story?
Well, her story is that she was, I would say, a woman of her time. Her life was shaped by where she lived and the circumstances that surrounded her. She was born in England in 1820. We just celebrated the 200th anniversary of her birth. We celebrated that on September 2nd. And she grew up at a time in England when there were many laws against the public practice of Catholicism, because there were the difficulties about the Church of England and so on. And Elizabeth was baptized into the Anglican Church, and it wasn't until her early 20s that she encountered the Passionist priests that you mentioned, Dominic Barberi, and also another of the priests was Gaudentius Rossi. And she encountered them, and in her early 20s was received into the Catholic Church. And then from there, because she was educated, she grew up in a middle-class family in industrial England. Because she was educated, she was able to work as a teacher. And I don't know how much of the detail you want me to go into, she encountered the Industrial Revolution in Manchester, England, and the extraordinary poverty of the people. And she responded to that. She responded to the needs that she saw at the time. When she joined the Catholic Church, she was disowned by her parents. They were very almost scandalized, because even though the laws changed, they changed only a few years before her birth, and so Catholicism wasn't very popular, let's say.
I understand. Yeah, prejudice against the church lasted through even until recent times. So
until the 20th century, I would say it has lasted. Yes.
And it was something of a scandal when former Prime Minister Tony Blair decided that he was going to enter the church of his wife and children, which is the Catholic Church, and
yes,
convert from Anglicanism.
Right.
So it's something that even in fairly recent times is still, and even Pope Benedict visiting England during his pontificate,
yes,
that was something that was found to be somewhat scandalous. So,
right.
I mean, things have changed. I believe that he met with the Reverend Ian Paisley, who refused to meet with John Paul II, but nonetheless, it's there's still a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment there.
Yes,
even to this very moment. Now, I understood that her father was born and raised Catholic, but that he was lapsed, while her mother was a fervent Anglican.
Correct.
Okay. Did her? Do we know why her father had lapsed?
No, we know very little. The only thing that the archivists have been able to find is her baptismal record from, I believe, 1820, but they have never been able to find any information other than they know that her father was what they called a cooper. He was a barrel maker.
Okay.
And but they don't have any indication of why he might have left the church, except perhaps because of the persecutions that went on.
Absolutely.
You know, that Catholics were liable to be arrested and so on. There is an interesting link. I don't know if you've talked about it when you talked about Dominic or Ignatius Spencer,
Mm-hmm.
but the Passionists were the men's order was founded by St. Paul of the Cross in the 1700s. And at that time, Catholicism was outlawed in England. And one of Paul of the Cross's great prayers was for the conversion of England.
Really?
And so when the toleration laws came into effect in I believe it was the 1830s, the Passionists were almost the first Catholic missionaries to go to England to preach and to try to get the Catholic Church rebuilt in England. It was the original prayer of Paul of the Cross.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I believe Father Ben Lodge, who spoke with me about both Father Spencer and Father Barberi, had mentioned that. The other thing is about Elizabeth. One thing that we do know about her, Elizabeth, from her childhood, is that she was, again, the son of a cooper, son of a barrel maker, who worked for one of the local breweries, which is still in existence.
Yes,
that was what I found during my research, and that's kind of neat. But one wouldn't think that necessarily that it would have been a comfortable middle class lifestyle, and yet indeed it was. And she was a beautiful young woman. She could have had any number of marriage offers, and yet she decided that she wanted, after her conversion, that she wanted to become a religious. Now, why is this? Do we know?
We don't. We can presume that I think of her as she was ruled by compassion. the after she joined the Catholic Church, because she was educated, and it was very unusual for women to be literate even, but she was educated and able then to be a teacher. And when she went to Manchester, where the school was, Father Dominic assisted her in getting this job in St. Chad's Parish in Manchester, and that's where the school was. And from there, she could go into the slums, and she saw the poverty of the people. They lived in shacks. There was no plumbing. There was no clean water available. The children had no educations. There were no labor laws to protect even 6-year-olds from working in the factories. So I would like to think that she was moved with compassion, and her focus in all of her work, her life was not very long, but in the years that she had, her focus was always the women and the children, to help the women and to educate the children.
Well, when you talk about the women and the children, I mean, she didn't have from what I understand, St. Chad's was right on the other side, right across the street from the worst slum, Angel Meadow. And
Right.
it's the women and children that work there. I mean, if you're a woman, you were lucky if you got 25 pence per week. And to put that into modern perspectives, that's about 27 pounds today, but about $36. Whereas with the children, it was 5 to 20 pence per week. And then which would work out to anywhere from between 5 pounds and 21 pounds to $7.24 today, for up to $28.93 per week. So
Right.
even if you've got 10 children and they're all working for that wage, and the mom's working, and the dad's maybe working for £1 a week or something, we're not talking a lot of money, are we?
We're talking subsistence and less than subsistence. There were no laws about how long someone could work. They were forced to work sometimes 72 hours a week, even young children, 6 years old.
Holy
So I did a talk to a group one time, and I have some slides of the children at these big looms, because most of their work was in mills. They were making cloth. They were weaving cloth to ship to other places in the world. And children were killed. They were caught in the machines. They lost hands and fingers and so on. And there really was no social safety net. There was nothing to protect them from the desire on the part of the mill owners and the corporations and the industries that were rising up. There was no protection for the people that it was being built upon. It was being built upon these people. And Elizabeth saw the women with no options, and she saw the children with no futures. And I would like to think that that circumstance, because she was a spiritual woman, that she was driven by compassion to help in some way.
Now, what I find interesting is that she would have possibly literally crossed paths with the founders of communism, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who came to many of their ideas because of what they saw, the exploitation of workers and labor in the slums at Angel Meadow and other places around Manchester. There was also the Duchess of Sutherland, a woman they called Meddlesome Millie, who was doing some great social work there, as well as a woman named Lydia Becker. But I guess her pastor at St. Chad's, Father William Turner, was who later became a bishop, that he encouraged her to go into the religious life. But it wasn't with the Passionists at first, was it?
No, it was with the Sisters of, I think, the Infant Jesus, I believe that was the name. But she stayed there only for a year or so. She became a novice, but then left because of illness. She had the climate in England, and still is, very damp. And she did a lot of walking to go around the city to different schools and places. And she developed tuberculosis in the bones of her knee.
Really?
And she had to leave that community and went home to her mother, who was still angry at her because she became a Catholic. And she had a bit of an unpleasant time with her mother.
It must be so very difficult to live in a household. I know it is, and just if you'll bear with me, shameless plug alert for folks. I should have had this at the ready, but I didn't know we were going to be talking about this. In my book, 150 North American Martyrs You Should Know, I talk about the martyrdom of Father James Coyle down in Alabama. And the woman who was the proximate cause of his martyrdom by her marriage to a Catholic, and herself becoming Catholic, she was locked in her bedroom by her parents, was abused by her parents, physically abused by her parents for becoming Catholic. So this isn't a unique phenomenon, but so she goes from Northampton, where the Sisters of the Infant Jesus have their lovely convent, back to back home. And do we remember the name of the town where she was from? Do we know?
Shrewsbury.
Shrewsbury, okay.
Shrewsbury, England.
Which is a beautiful town.
It is, yes.
It's very lovely. It's very quaint. But in any event, so she goes there. She has this bad experience. Is this where she meets Father Rossi? Or is he been along somewhere else?
Well, she knew him before. I'm not quite sure of the chronology of it.
Okay.
Because as far as we know, Father Dominic is the one who received her into the church. And I believe that Gaudentius Rossi came to work with him, although I'm not sure of the chronology. But when she was at home with her mother, it was then that the arrangement was made that she would go to St. Chad's in Manchester. So she went from Shrewsbury to Manchester at that time.
I got you. Very good. Now, Father Rossi, he knew other women who were like Elizabeth and thought that she would be a good leader for someone, for a new group that could form under the Passionist mantle. Is that correct?
Well, he wasn't thinking of the Passionist mantle. That came a bit later, after he left England and he came to the United States. Actually, he lived in Pittsburgh. And it was after his departure that Father Ignatius Spencer came on the scene. And it was he who fostered more the Passionist identity.
Father Spencer really strikes me as kind of a bulldog, an English bulldog, if you will, in a good sense. I mean, he's just tenacious. He's vigorous. He's tenacious. He is just really, and he has kind of a single-mindedness of purpose in terms of what he wants to accomplish.
Well, you've mentioned before that you've already discussed him, but he was almost a nobility person in England, and when he joined the Catholic Church, it was quite scandalous.
Oh yeah.
He's a distant relative of Princess Diana, who was a Spencer. So he must have been very tenacious, because he had to push away from his whole family and whatever they were connected to. I don't have too much of an understanding of nobility, but he had to leave all that. And the Passionists are were a very austere order. And so to choose them was a very determined and difficult path for him to follow.
Well, and it was austere for Mother Elizabeth at the outset, wasn't it?
That I don't recall. No, I don't know that.
Because she had these 6 or so women with her, and that it was so difficult that some of them left.
Yes.
Later, gave voice to some gossip that was damaging.
There was some unpleasantness. When I first entered the community back in the 1960s, we didn't speak of Mother Mary Joseph. We'd never heard of her, really, until the history was done and the archives were better understood. And we saw that what she suffered, she suffered from her own, from the women who were with her. The difficulty was within the group, and she was the one who came out as the strong, virtuous person. And for a long time, we didn't know that. For a long time, all we knew was, oh, there was something that happened. But until one of the sisters did her doctoral dissertation on the history of the community, it was then that all of this came out about how she had to negotiate all of these things, and she came out the virtuous and able leader of the women.
Was that Sister Dominic Savio?
Mm-hmm.
She's a remarkable woman.
She's a great historian. Yes,
from the reading the work that she's done to bring this story to light.
Right.
It's really quite impressive, because you want to talk about tenacity and following every lead wherever it led. That has been so. We have to give a warm shout out to Sister, because without
the congregation owes her a great debt.
Well, and the church as well, because this is a great story to know. So, it was interesting. One of the things here, and excuse me, I'm going to switch over so I can read this because I don't want to misquote it. But she had said something to the effect, she's quoted as, and this is speaking to the poverty that these women were experiencing, because they had to support themselves. No matter what else they were doing out in the community, they had to support themselves. So they took in sewing work. The Singer sewing machine wasn't invented until 1851 and wasn't even available in England at that point. And so she says, sewing is so unproductive as to make it necessary to work night and day to make the very poorest living. So again, speaking to this remarkable poverty that they have to.
Well, a word of explanation that what Elizabeth Prout did that was revolutionary for her time was that she made membership in the community available to everyone, to all women. The customary thing was that when a woman entered a religious community, she brought with her a dowry, and the dowry helped to support the sisters who were already there. But Elizabeth said, no, even poor women can enter the community. Even uneducated women could enter the community. And consequently, they had to support themselves. Some of the early sisters worked in the factories in order to earn money to support the community. So that was something she did that was quite revolutionary, and it showed her compassion toward women who aspired to a religious life, but for whom it was not available.
So within a very short period of time, because the life is so tough, and the rule that, did the toughness of the life, did that have anything to do with the rule that she had written?
Well, actually, the first rule was written by Father Gaudentius.
Okay.
And it was austere. They required, I remember reading someplace, they used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning in order to get all their prayers in. and then they would have to be about their day's occupations, whether it was teaching or whether it was working in the factory or whatever they were doing. And it was austere. They were poor. There were times when there might not have been enough to eat. So that had an effect. Yes, it had an effect on them, I'm sure. And Elizabeth herself died when she was 43 years old. So.
And that speaks to how overworked she was, I'm sure.
Well, and also because the dampness and the lack of proper nutrition and so on, that tuberculosis came back, and she died of tuberculosis at age 43.
Forgive me if I'm asking you a question about which you have no knowledge, but
okay, I'll tell you.
Okay, great, perfect. You talked about how tuberculosis got into her knee. I'm familiar with consumption, tuberculosis getting into the lungs and even the spinal column. I've never heard of it getting into the extremities. So what's the effect? Do you know?
I have no idea, except that she eventually lost the ability to walk. I think it might have, I don't know what it was. All I know is that I read tubercular knee. I don't know what that is.
Okay, interesting. You know, it's just as a side note, what's fascinating is how many saints have died of tuberculosis. I'm thinking about actually doing an episode on that, but I mean, so many have either had it and recovered. Like,
well, they lived in damp, cold places, and probably didn't have sufficient heat. You know, in the name of holiness, they would suffer in silence. I can see it happening. Yep. It probably would be interesting to see how many there were, but
it's dozens. It's really fascinating. Like I said, I think I want to do an episode on this. So anyway, because of how difficult the lifestyle is, she's dwindled down to her and one other woman who I believe became her successor. How did she rebuild?
I believe it was Sister Paul Mary. I think that was her name.
Okay.
Who became the second superior general.
Okay.
Right. And again, I don't know the chronology. I have the books here, but I don't want to go through them while I'm talking to you. I don't know the exact pieces of it, but when Elizabeth died, the community was very small, but they persevered, and the community grew and then spread out to all different continents and nationalities, and became a flourishing success.
Now, did they establish communities in the United States as well?
Say that again?
Did they eventually go on to establish communities here in the United States as well?
Yes. The sisters came to this country, I believe again, I'm not exact about the dates, but it was in the 1920s. I would guess it was 1927, but I'm not sure.
And where did they set up shop, so to speak?
They came to Rhode Island. They came to the Diocese of Providence in Rhode Island, and they had the first sisters had one parish in Providence. It's still there, and one of our sisters still works in the rectory. They ran a very successful elementary school for many, many years, and from Providence, we branched out into Connecticut, New York. We had a mission for 35 years in Jamaica in the West Indies. We had sisters in Memphis, Tennessee for another 25 years. And now, this province anyway, we're in another stage of life because of the vocation situation in this country. And but we're here in the United States, but we also have sisters in Argentina, Peru, Chile, Botswana in Africa, and we had the newest branch is in Vietnam. We have 4 sisters who have taken their first vows, I think, and we have 7 in the novitiate in Vietnam.
That's fantastic. Someone just tried to hack me from Vietnam today, according to
really?
my security monitoring. So yeah, I'm been thinking about them a lot lately. So there you have it.
Yeah.
So she.
Oh, and we have, excuse me, and we also have sisters in Australia.
That's it's awesome. I mean, and all because of the work and the fortitude and the perseverance.
Yes.
For the love of Jesus Christ of one woman.
Yes.
And those who work with her. I don't want to, I mean, it's like a good quarterback is only as good as his offensive line that protects him and his running backs and receivers and that sort of thing.
And
but,
the
quarterback still runs the show.
Yeah, the spirituality, though, is that's the word that I always put to it. The spirituality is a spirituality of compassion. And so you see what is around you, and you do what you can to help alleviate suffering. It's the compassion of Jesus. It's relatively straightforward. The trick is to make it real in your lives.
What we know that she didn't live a very long life. When she died, was it did her illness come on quick and then take her? I mean, did the tuberculosis kind of flare back up and then, it was a very short period of time? As
far as I know, she was ill for some time.
Yeah, okay.
Because when she died, I believe I read that the sisters were with her. So they knew that death was coming, but she had been ill for some time.
What a shame. Because, our Lord died young. Saint Teresa of Lisieux died young. So many great saints died young.
Yes.
But, you always wish that they could have kept on a little bit longer so that we could have had the benefit of their ministry and apostolate and that sort of thing.
I understand that mentality, but or that wish, that desire, but you profit from the little time you've had. You profit from focusing on the years that they were able to serve, and you also focus on how many people are inspired simply by the example. The length of life is not the issue. The issue is the strength of the charism.
Yet again, I stand humbly and thankfully corrected. So that's a great point that you make there, sister. What is it that the modern layman can take from her life, or the modern religious, the modern priest, the modern bishop, modern cardinal, whoever, can take from her life, and you say, okay, I'm going to use this to become an image of Christ myself?
This might be a little controversial, but I am of the opinion, in my work, I've worked with many religious communities of both men and women, dealing with legal issues. And I am of the opinion that all charisms, that they eventually fold into one another.
Okay.
They are, each holy person gives us a different aspect of the compassion of Jesus. And so when you say, what can Catholics today, men, women, priests, whoever, what can they take from the life of Elizabeth? They can take the degree to which she modeled her life on the life of Jesus. She did it in a particular way, in a particular time, and in a particular set of circumstances. She responded to the Industrial Revolution. She responded to the poverty in Manchester. She responded to the to the Catholics who were living in that horrible slum. That was her life. So we look around at our neighborhoods and what is in need of some Jesus-like compassion, and we go and do it, or we try. But it all goes down to Jesus. It all comes down to all the charisms, all the blessings, all the graces. They're different facets of the life of Christ. So I know I've compressed that, but
That's beautiful.
that's just what I've come to.
No, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful insight. Sister Lisa Renee, thank you so much for your time with us today.
Oh,
and
you're very welcome. I've enjoyed it.
I have as well, and I hope that if we have another Passionist to talk about, you'll come back and talk about that person as well.
Absolutely do it. Yes.
Fantastic. And thank you for joining us here on That Catholic Saints Guy. I hope you've enjoyed this program. And if you have, please do hit that subscribe button, click the thumbs up, ring the little bell, and that way you'll get notifications the next time we have a program. And in the meantime, I hope you'll join us next time on That Catholic Saints Guy.